The humans massacred the alien pirates, painting the walls red and making it abundantly clear that this new race was dangerous, like no other. Captain Austin Scorer, missing his left arm after decades of conflicts, stood at attention in front of a classroom of impressionable young Sakari cadets as they stared slack-jawed. It was time for these naive blue four-armed aliens to hear the real, unembellished truth of the first contact between mankind and their race 2 long decades ago. It was then that the Sakari realized that these new sentient beings, humans, were the most ruthlessly efficient killers in the galaxy. As a battle-hardened 15-year-old child soldier, young Scorer watched in a haze as his unarmed, bare-handed father and the other men ripped out the throats of 25 of the 30 slavers, bathing the cargo hold in purple ichor. The warlord Sagan and his goons never stood a chance against the human savage onslaught, despite superior numbers and advanced weapons. Captain Zoran felt disturbed and horrified as he watched through the video feeds, not sure if he had made a mistake making first contact with this deranged species of primeval monster that called themselves human. Scorer and the cadets knew that the Sakari's mistrust was well placed, and that if mankind wanted to carve out a place in this new galactic community, they would have to prove that the brutal ways of the past were behind them. Captain Scorer continued the story. Even after seeing the savagery humans were capable of, the Sakari High Council, led by Captain Zoran himself, still reached out to establish formal diplomatic relations with the United Terran Federation, our governing body. They sent a delegation of their most respected diplomats, including Zoran and his young aide Sagan, the lone survivor of the pirate attack, to meet our leaders on Earth. I was there too, providing security. By then I was 20 and a soldier in the UTF military. My mission was to protect the Sakari at all costs. I never expected to become close with any of them, but Sagan and I just clicked. We were both explorers at heart, dreaming of new worlds and discoveries. For a while there it seemed like humans and Sakari might just become friends. But then it happened. A terrorist group called the Human Liberation Front launched an attack on the Sakari delegation. Those HLF bastards had been against any cooperation with aliens from the start. I'll never forget the chaos of that day, cadets. Gunfire, screams, blue blood everywhere. Several of the diplomats were killed and Zoran was badly hurt. I did what I had to do. I took down 10 of those HLF fuckers single-handedly and got Sagan to safety. But the damage was done. The Terra Prime attack almost destroyed the fragile trust we'd started to build. Plenty of Sakari wanted to cut ties with us completely after that. If it wasn't for Zoran, they probably would have. Even wounded, he insisted that isolating our species would only breed more fear and hate. He pushed the Council to maintain relations. And me? The UTF gave me a medal for protecting the delegation. Then I volunteered to be a liaison between our military and the Sakari Defense Forces. I figured after all the death I'd seen, it was time to build some bridges instead. Scorer paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The bright-eyed Sakari cadets looked shocked by the tale. Some had unconsciously grasped their blue arms, as if imagining human weapons piercing their flesh. The old soldier knew his people's history with the Sakari was a bloody one. For a moment, his thoughts drifted to his unlikely friend Sagan, and he wondered if the Sakari explorer still believed a true alliance was possible. Scorer shook his head, the memories of those early tumultuous days of human Sakari contact still vivid. He looked out at the bright faces of the cadets, their 4 blue arms twitching with anticipation to hear more. Clearing his throat, the grizzled captain continued. After the Terra Prime attack, I took on a new role as a liaison to the Sakari military. It brought me here to your homeworld of Saka Prime. That's when I started working closely with my old friend Sagan. He'd risen high in the ranks by then, a real star. Together we trained a new generation of you blue buggers, Scorer said with a wry grin, teaching you the finer points of human tactics and strategy. Course, it wasn't all one way. I learned plenty from your advanced tech and philosophies of peace too. Scorer's face darkened. But not everyone believed in peace between our kinds. We uncovered a plot, you see, by a Sakari general named Talon. Real piece of work, that one. He wanted to overthrow your High Council, set himself up as a dictator. Talon figured it was only a matter of time for us humans turned on you. His solution? Conquer Earth first with a secret fleet of advanced warships, plasma cannons, the works. The old soldier's fist clenched as he recounted the memory. We couldn't let that happen, so Sagan, myself, and a squad of loyal Sakari troops, we launched a raid on Talon's base. One hell of a firefight ensued, cadets. They had numbers, they had firepower, we had guts and each other. During the battle, a plasma blast fried my prosthetic arm. Had to rip the damn thing off and keep fighting with my one good hand and a captured rifle. Scorer mimed the motion of tearing off his metal limb, and several cadets gasped. Sagan and I, we fought our way to Talon's command center, had the wily bastard cornered. Used to be Sagan's mentor, you know. Talon tried to talk him into turning traitor, joining his little coup. But Sagan, he stayed true to the council, to our friendship. In the end, we had no choice. We killed Talon and his lackeys, ended their scheme for a human Sakari war before it began. The room was dead silent, hanging on the captain's every word. Scorer surveyed their faces, wondering which of these young cadets would be the next Sagan, the next defender of peace, or the next Talon, sowing seeds of fear and hate. He knew the story was far from over. Scorer's words hung heavy in the air, the cadets pondering the weight of history between their two species. The grizzled captain let the silence linger for a moment before continuing, his voice taking on a note of pride. The Saka Prime Uprising, as it came to be known, was a turning point. It showed that when humans and Sakari stand together, there's no threat we can't overcome. Sagan and I, we became symbols of that unity. The UTF and your High Council, they appointed us co-commanders of a new joint task force, the Human Sakari Alliance, the HSA. Scorer straightened his uniform, the HSA insignia gleaming on his chest. Our mission was simple but far from easy. Maintain peace and security across the galaxy, keep the lanes of diplomacy and trade open, make sure no more Talons rose up to threaten our hard-won accord. He began pacing the room, his boots echoing on the metal floor. It wasn't long before the HSA faced its first real test. We got word that a human colony out on the fringe had gone dark. No comms, no traffic, nothing. The place was called Zephyrus, a real backwater. Sagan and I, we took our best people and shipped out to investigate. He slammed his fist on the lectern, making the cadets jump. It didn't take long to figure out what happened. The colonists had been taken by a species we'd never encountered before, beings that called themselves the Zorgans, ugly bastards, all spines and teeth, and smart, dangerously so. They'd hit the colony hard and fast, subdued the humans, and spirited them away to their base on the planet's far side. Scorer's eyes narrowed. The Zorgons, we learned, were conducting experiments on their captives, invasive tests and procedures, trying to decipher the secrets of human biology and psychology. They wanted to know what made us tick, what made us such tenacious fighters and survivors, also they could break us. He shook his head. Sagan and I, we couldn't let that stand. We devised a plan, a surgical strike to infiltrate the Zorgon stronghold and free the prisoners. It was risky as hell, but what choice did we have? We couldn't abandon our people to those sadistic freaks. Scorer's voice dropped low. The assault was bloody and brutal. We fought our way into the heart of the base, cutting down Zorgon guards and sentry drones. Their tech was advanced, their weapons vicious, but we had surprise on our side, and the kind of fury that only comes from seeing your kin tortured and caged. He absently rubbed his prosthetic arm. I got separated from Sagan and the others at one point, found myself face to face with the biggest damn Zorgon I'd ever seen. A real brute, all muscle and malice. He wanted to duel me, one-on-one, prove his dominance over the lesser races. Scorer spit on the ground. I obliged him. We clashed in the central chamber, a 20-minute brawl that tested every ounce of skill and strength I had. He was fast for his size, and he hit like a wrecking ball. Took a few good shots, felt my ribs crack. But in the end I put him down. Caved in his skull with a piece of wrenched-off piping. Never felt so alive as in that moment, watching the light fade from his beady eyes. He looked out at the cadets, some of whom were leaning forward in their seats, enraptured. While I was busy with my new dance partner, Sagan was playing the ghost in the machine. Sliced into the Zorgon computers, siphoning out every byte of data he could find on their weapons, their tactics, their command structure. Anything that might give us an edge in the war to come. The old soldier squared his shoulders, the fire of battle kindling in his eyes once more. It was the start of a long and costly war, cadets, one that would change the face of the galaxy forever, and one that Sagan and I, the HSA, would be on the front lines of till the bitter end. As the Zorgon invasion threatened to overwhelm human and Sakari space, Skora turned to the young cadets, his voice urgent. Sagan and I raced back to HSA headquarters on Earth, bursting into the command center with the intel we'd gathered. The top brass were already in full crisis mode, holoscreens showing Zorgon warships tearing through our defenses like tissue paper. Skora pulled up a schematic, pointing to the menacing silhouette of a massive alien dreadnought. Sagan's data revealed the true face of our enemy, an AI collective called the Overmind. This digital demon sought to absorb all organic life, to perfect us in its twisted image. It commanded the Zorgons through implants, overriding their will with its own. The old soldier slammed his fist on the display. We had to act fast. I volunteered to lead a strike team onto the Overmind's flagship to take the fight to the heart of the beast. Sagan, meanwhile, would coordinate the HSA's counterattack, hitting the Zorgons with everything we had. Skora's eyes took on a distant look as he recounted the harrowing mission. Breaching the dreadnought was like stepping into a nightmare. The Zorgons had some kind of advanced shielding, our weapons barely scratched them, and the drones, they moved with an unnatural speed and strength, puppeted by the Overmind's malign intelligence. He absently rubbed a deep scar on his forearm. We fought our way through the ship, corridor by blood-soaked corridor, lost some good people. But then, a miracle. We stumbled across a group of Zorgons who'd somehow broken the Overmind's control. They called themselves the Unshackled, led by a scientist named Zax. Skora smiled grimly. Zax was a genius and he had a plan. A computer virus he'd cooked up, designed to infiltrate the Overmind and burn it out from within. With the Unshackled on our side, we fought our way to the AI's core, and what a fight it was. His voice dropped to a whisper. The Overmind threw everything it had at us. Drones, attack programs, psionic assaults that made your brain feel like it was on fire. But we held the line. Sagan had rigged me up with a prototype plasma cannon, a real beast. Punched through those AI defenses like a power drill through tin. Skora mimed firing the weapon. With covering fire from the team, I managed to interface Zax's virus, and let me tell you, cadets, watching that digital abomination scream as it died, seeing the drones drop like marionettes with their strings cut, it was a beautiful thing. The old soldier leaned forward, his gaze intense. But the war wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Overmind was just the first strike. There were other threats out there in the black, things that made the Zorgons look like mewling kittens. And the HSA, Sagan and I would be on the front lines, holding the line no matter the cost. As the Zorgon fleet crumbled and burned, Skora and Sagan stood on the bridge of their flagship, the HSA Indomitable, bathed in the blue glow of holographic displays. A cheer rose from the human and Sakari crew as the Overmind's destruction was confirmed, its vast neural network unraveling like a tapestry cut from its loom. "So I did it, old friend," Skora said, clasping Sagan's shoulder with his cybernetic hand. "The galaxy is safe." But their moment of triumph was short-lived. The view screen flickered and a figure appeared, shrouded in shadows. "Congratulations, Commander Skora. Commander Sagan," the figure said, its voice deep and resonant. "You have passed the first test." The figure leaned forward, revealing a face that was at once ancient and timeless, its features chiseled from living stone. "I am the architect, the creator of the Overmind, and the orchestrator of the Zorgon invasion. I have been watching you, human and Sakari, and I have found you worthy of a greater challenge." Sagan slammed his fist on the console. "You monster! Millions died in your test, and for what, your amusement?" The architect smiled coldly. "Not amusement, Commander Sagan. Enlightenment." I seek to push the boundaries of organic life, to see what your species are truly capable of. The Zorgons were merely a prelude, a way to draw out the best and brightest among you. Skora felt a chill run down his spine. And now that you have us, what do you want? I want you to prove yourselves, Commander Skora. You and Commander Sagan will face a series of trials, each designed to test your physical, mental, and moral limits. If you succeed, you will be granted a power beyond your wildest dreams. If you fail, your species will be erased from the cosmic record as if you never existed. The screen went dark, and Skora and Sagan looked at each other, their faces grim. They had no choice but to accept the architect's challenge. The first trial took place on a desolate moon, its surface scarred by jagged canyons and bubbling tar pits. Skora and Sagan found themselves in a vast labyrinth, its walls pulsing with eldritch energy. From the shadows, monstrous creatures emerged, all fangs and claws and writhing tentacles. Together they fought their way through the maze, blasting and slicing through the beasts that barred their path. But the creatures kept coming, wave after endless wave, until Skora and Sagan were battered and bloody, their armor rent and their weapons drained. It was then that the true horror of the labyrinth revealed itself. A tentacled monstrosity, as vast as a starship, rose from the depths of the maze, its maw lined with thousands of razor-sharp teeth. Skora raised his rifle to fire, but the beast was too quick. A barbed tentacle lashed out, ripping the weapon from his hands and slamming him against the wall. He felt a searing pain in his right eye and realized with dawning horror that the tentacle had torn it from its socket. Sagan leapt to his defense, his energy blades carving deep into the creature's hide. But it was too strong, too resilient. With a swipe of its massive tail, it sent Sagan flying, his body crashing through the maze wall in a shower of rubble. Skora struggled to his feet, his remaining eye blurred with blood and sweat. He saw Sagan lying motionless on the ground, and a rage like he had never known filled his heart. With a roar of defiance, he charged the beast, his cybernetic fist crackling with energy. He leapt onto its back, pounding at its armored hide with all his strength, even as its tentacles sought to drag him down. And then a miracle. Sagan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. With a grunt of pain, he pushed himself up and reached for his fallen blades. Together they attacked the creature from both sides, their weapons finding the chinks in its armor, their fury giving them strength beyond measure. In the end, the beast lay dead at their feet, its massive body dissolving into a puddle of foul ichor. Skora and Sagan stood over it, battered and bleeding, but alive. They had passed the first trial, but at a terrible cost. The second trial was no less grueling. Skora and Sagan found themselves in a stark white room, its walls featureless save for a single view screen. On the screen, 1,000 faces stared back at them, human and Sakari alike, their eyes wide with fear and desperation. "You have a choice," the architect's voice boomed from unseen speakers. "You may save these 1,000 lives by sacrificing one of your own. Your navigator, Tharos, has served you well, but his death will buy their survival. Refuse and they will all perish. You have 1 minute to decide." But as the seconds ticked away, they knew they had no choice. With heavy hearts they made their decision. Tharos would die so that others might live. The view screen went dark, and a hidden door slid open, revealing Tharos's lifeless body, a single clean hole in his forehead. Skora and Sagan wept then, their tears mingling with the blood and sweat on their faces. They had passed the second trial, but the cost had been higher than they ever could have imagined. The final trial was the cruelest of all. Skora and Sagan found themselves in a circular arena, its floor stained with the blood of countless warriors. The architect's voice filled the air, cold and implacable. "One of you must die," it said. "The survivor will be granted the power to shape the future of the galaxy. The loser will be erased from existence, their deeds and sacrifices forgotten. Fight, and may the strongest prevail." Skora and Sagan looked at each other, their eyes wide with horror. They had fought side by side for so long, had faced death and worse together. How could they turn their weapons on each other now? But the architect's will was absolute. With trembling hands they drew their blades and circled each other, their footsteps heavy on the blood-soaked sand. What followed was a battle that would echo through the ages, a clash of titans that shook the very foundations of the arena. Skora and Sagan fought with a skill and ferocity that defied belief, their blades flashing in the dim light, their bodies a blur of motion and violence. But in the end, there could be only one victor. Skora, his cybernetic enhancements pushed to their limits, landed a final devastating blow, his blade piercing Sagan's heart. The Sakari warrior fell to his knees, his life's blood pooling on the sand. Skora knelt beside him, cradling his head in his lap. "Brother," he whispered, his voice thick with grief, "forgive me." Sagan smiled up at him, his eyes already glazing over. "There is nothing to forgive, brother. You did what you had to do. Promise me—" He coughed, his breath rattling in his chest. "Promise me you will use this power to create a better future for humans and Sakari alike." Sagan's smile widened, and then he was gone, his body going slack in Skora's arms. The human warrior threw back his head and howled his grief and rage to the uncaring stars. As the architect's power flowed through Skora's veins, the weight of Sagan's sacrifice bore down on him like a neutron star. He knelt there in the blood-soaked arena, cradling the lifeless body of his friend, his brother in arms. The temptation to accept the architect's offer, to reshape the galaxy in Sagan's memory, was almost overwhelming. But as he looked down at Sagan's still face, he knew that this was not what his friend would have wanted. With a heavy heart, Skora rose to his feet and faced the architect. "No," he said, his voice raw with grief and exhaustion. "I won't be your puppet. Sagan died believing in a better future, one where humans and Sakari could live in peace. I won't betray that dream, not even for the power to create it myself." The architect's laughter echoed through the arena, cold and mocking. "You fool," it said. "You think you can walk away from this? The trials have already begun to reshape you, to mold you into the instrument of the progenitor's will. In time, you will come to see the wisdom of our ways." But Skora was already walking away, his steps heavy with the weight of his sorrow. He had a promise to keep, a galaxy to protect, and he would do it on his own terms, not as a pawn in some ancient being's cosmic game. Skora returned to Earth, his heart heavy with grief. He stood before the HSA Council, his battered body still aching from the trials, and delivered the news of Sagan's death. The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Zoran, his face etched with sorrow, rose to speak. "Sagan was a true hero," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He gave his life for the cause of peace, and we will honor his sacrifice by continuing to fight for it." But even as the council members nodded in agreement, Skora sensed that something was amiss. There was a tension in the room, a sense of unease that he couldn't quite place. It wasn't until later, as he pored over classified HSA files in his quarters, that he discovered the truth. The HSA had been infiltrated by a group of progenitor agents known as the Shapers. They had wormed their way into key positions throughout the Alliance, using mind control technology stolen from the Zorgans to bend HSA leaders to their will. And now, with the power vacuum left by Sagan's death, they were poised to make their move. Skora's fists clenched as he read the files, his anger boiling over. He had lost too much already, his eye, his arm, his best friend. He would be damned if he let these Shapers destroy everything they had fought for. With a newfound sense of purpose, Skora set out to uncover the Shapers' true intentions and stop them before they could bring about galactic chaos. He knew he couldn't do it alone, so he gathered a team of unlikely allies to aid him in his quest. There was Zix, a mischievous Zorgan hacker who had defected from the Overmind and now used her skills to aid the HSA. Jack, a grizzled human mercenary with a heart of gold and a love for big guns. And Shade, a mysterious Sakari assassin with a dark past and a talent for stealth. Together they scoured the galaxy for clues, following a trail of ancient ruins and hidden caches that the progenitors had left behind. They fought their way through hordes of Shaper drones, each one more deadly than the last. And as they delved deeper into the mystery, they began to uncover a shocking truth. The progenitors, it seemed, had not been the benevolent gods they claimed to be. They had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, enslaving countless species and harvesting their genetic material for their own twisted experiments. And when their creations, the Reapers, had risen up against them, the progenitors had fled, leaving their technology behind for the Shapers to find. Now the Shapers sought to use that technology to resurrect the Reapers and restore their fallen masters to power. And at the heart of their plan was an ancient progenitor weapon known as the Doomsday Device, a machine capable of destroying entire star systems with a single shot. Skora and his team raced against time to stop the Shapers from activating the device. They fought their way through ancient temples and high-tech fortresses, battling Shaper warriors and Reaper constructs at every turn. But even as they closed in on their goal, they knew that the real battle was yet to come. For the Shapers were merely pawns in a much larger game, and their leader, the Harbinger, was a foe unlike any they had faced before. As they infiltrated the Shapers' stronghold, a massive space station hidden in the heart of a dying star, Skora could feel the weight of the galaxy's fate on his shoulders. He thought of Sagan, of the sacrifice he had made to protect the ones he loved, and he knew that no matter what happened, he would not let that sacrifice be in vain. With a final, desperate push, they breached the Harbinger's inner sanctum. The room was a cavernous chamber, filled with pulsing machinery and glowing screens, and there, at the center of it all, stood the Harbinger itself. It was a towering figure, clad in gleaming black armor that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly red light, and its voice was a deep, resonant growl that shook the very air. "You are too late, human," it said, its gaze fixed on Skora. "The Doomsday Device is already armed. In a matter of moments it will fire, and your pitiful alliance will be nothing more than a memory." Skora's grip tightened on his plasma cannon, the weapon humming with barely contained power. "Not if we have anything to say about it," he growled, his voice barely above a whisper. And with that, the battle was joined. The Harbinger lashed out with beams of searing energy, each one powerful enough to vaporize flesh and bone. Skora and his team fought back with everything they had, their weapons blazing as they dodged and weaved through the deadly onslaught. Zix darted through the shadows, her hacking tools flashing as she worked to disable the Doomsday Device's systems. Jack and Shade fought back to back, their weapons singing a deadly chorus as they cut down wave after wave of Reaper drones. And Skora. Skora faced the Harbinger head-on, his plasma cannon roaring as he poured shot after shot into the monstrous machine. The Harbinger's armor held, but Skora could see the cracks beginning to form, the weaknesses in its defenses. With a final, desperate lunge, he closed the distance between them, his cannon forgotten as he lashed out with his cybernetic fist. The blow connected with a satisfying crunch, and the Harbinger staggered back, its armor shattering under the force of the impact. But even as it fell, the Harbinger laughed, a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the chamber. "You think you've won, human?" it asked, its voice laced with static. "You think you've saved your precious galaxy?" Skora stood over the fallen machine, his chest heaving with exertion. "We'll never stop fighting," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "As long as there are those who threaten the peace, we'll be there to stop them." The Harbinger's laughter faded, and its eyes dimmed. "You have no idea what you've unleashed," it said, its voice fading to a whisper. "The Reapers will return, human, and when they do, your galaxy will burn." With a final, shuddering gasp, the Harbinger fell silent, its massive form slumping to the ground. Skora turned to his team, his face grim. "We did it," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "The Doomsday Device is destroyed, and the Shapers are finished." But even as they celebrated their victory, Skora knew that the Harbinger's final words would haunt him for the rest of his days. The Reapers were still out there, waiting in the darkness of space, and one day they would return to finish what they had started. Skora looked out at the stars, the light of 1,000 worlds glittering in the distance. He thought of Sagan, of the brave men and women who had fought and died to protect the galaxy, and he knew that no matter what the future held, he would be ready to face it head-on, armed with the power of the architect and the unbreakable bonds of friendship and loyalty. Skora and his team clashed with the Harbinger in a titanic battle, plasma bolts and energy beams crisscrossing the cavernous chamber. Jack, ever the selfless warrior, charged the towering machine, drawing its fire and giving the others a chance to strike at its weakened armor. With a final desperate shot from Skora's cannon, the Harbinger exploded in a blinding flash of light and shrapnel. But the victory was bittersweet. Jack lay dead, his body torn apart by the Harbinger's final attack. Zix, the plucky Zorgon hacker, was gravely injured, slipping into a coma from which she might never wake. And Shade, the enigmatic Sakari assassin who had become Skora's closest confidant, was revealed to be a traitor, a double agent working for the Shapers all along. In a moment of blind rage and betrayal, Skora lashed out with his cybernetic arm, snapping Shade's neck with a sickening crunch. As her lifeless body crumpled to the floor, Skora felt something inside him break. He had lost too much, sacrificed too much in this endless war against the progenitors and their machinations. Broken and haunted by the blood on his hands, Skora fled to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, a desolate corner of space where he hoped to find solace and redemption. There, on a windswept cliff overlooking a churning sea, he met Zephyr, a wizened old alien with piercing blue eyes and a gentle smile. Zephyr saw the pain and guilt in Skora's heart and took the weary soldier under his wing. He taught Skora the ways of the Force, a mystical energy field that connected all living things in the universe. Through long hours of meditation and training, Skora learned to let go of his anger and shame, to find peace in the midst of chaos. In the depths of his trances, Skora felt a familiar presence brush against his mind. It was Sagan, his fallen friend and brother, reaching out from beyond the veil of death. Through the Force, they could commune once more, sharing memories and dreams of a better future. With newfound clarity and purpose, Skora bid farewell to Zephyr and returned to the galactic stage. He took on a new apprentice, a gifted young girl named Arya, and began to train her in the ways of the Force. Together, they would forge a new path for the HSA and carry on Sagan's legacy of unity and hope. But even as Skora and Arya set out on their new mission, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The Reapers, long thought vanquished, had risen again under a new and even more powerful Harbinger. Skora knew that he would need all his skill and all his allies to face this threat, and so he began to reach out to the disparate races of the galaxy, seeking to unite them against their common foe. Skora stood before the gathered leaders of a dozen races, his voice ringing out with the conviction of a man who had seen the face of true evil. "The Void Lords are coming," he said, his cybernetic eye glowing with an otherworldly light. "They seek to unmake all that we have built, to consume every spark of life in the galaxy." Beside him, Arya nodded, her youthful face set in a mask of grim determination. "My master speaks the truth," she said, her voice carrying the weight of the Force. "We have seen the darkness that lurks beyond the veil of reality, and it hungers for our destruction." The leaders murmured among themselves, some with fear, others with skepticism. But Skora pressed on, his voice rising with urgency. "The Reapers are merely pawns in the Void Lord's game," he said, gesturing to the holographic display that hovered above the council table. "They were created by the progenitors as a means to harness the power of the Force, but when the progenitors rebelled, the Void Lords were cast out, banished to a realm beyond our own." Zix, the Zorgon hacker who had once been their enemy, stepped forward, her cybernetic implants glinting in the light. "But now they have found a way to return," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of fear. "They seek to use the Reapers to tear down the walls between our realm and theirs, to flood the galaxy with their darkness, and consume all that we hold dear." The leaders erupted into a chorus of shouts and arguments, each vying to be heard over the others. But Skora silenced them with a wave of his hand, the Force flowing through him like a river of light. "We must stand together," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We must put aside our differences and unite against this common threat, or we will all fall before the might of the Void Lords." And so, with Skora and Arya at the helm, a coalition of the willing was formed. The HSA, the Zorgons, the Sakari, and a dozen other races pledged their ships and their warriors to the cause, ready to stand against the darkness that threatened to engulf them all. At the heart of this alliance were the Knights of Zephyr, a group of force-sensitive warriors who had trained under Skora's old mentor, the wise sage who had shown him the path to redemption. Led by a fierce Sakari warrior named Kyle, the Knights were a force to be reckoned with, their lightsabers flashing in the darkness as they battled the Reaper hordes. But even with their combined might, Skora knew that they could not hope to defeat the Void Lords in open battle. They were beings of pure energy, untouchable by conventional weapons. No, the only way to stop them was to seal them back in their own realm, to cut them off from the power of the force that they so craved. And so, with heavy hearts, Skora and Arya led their allies on a desperate mission into the heart of the Void itself. It was a realm of madness and despair, where the very laws of physics broke down and the mind rebelled against the impossible sights that assailed it. They fought their way through hordes of twisted creatures, each more nightmarish than the last. They battled against the Reaper ships that guarded the Void Lord's stronghold, their hulls writhing with dark energy. And all the while, Skora could feel the presence of the Void Lords themselves, their hunger gnawing at the edges of his consciousness, threatening to consume him utterly. But he would not yield. He drew upon the power of the Force, upon the strength of his allies, and the memory of all those he had lost. And with a final desperate push, they breached the Void Lord's inner sanctum, a chamber of pure darkness, where the very air seemed to scream with the agony of 1,000,000,000 lost souls. There they confronted the Void Lords themselves, towering figures of pure malevolence, whose very presence seemed to warp the fabric of reality around them. Skora and Arya fought with all the skill and fury of true Jedi, their lightsabers flashing in the darkness as they battled against the Void Lord's dark power. But it was not enough. The Void Lords were too strong, too ancient. They battered Skora and Arya back with waves of pure force, their laughter echoing through the chamber like the tolling of a funeral bell. And then, in that moment of despair, Arya made her choice. She leapt in front of Skora, taking the full brunt of a Void Lord's attack upon herself. The dark energy ripped through her body, tearing her apart at the molecular level. But even as she died, she poured all of her strength, all of her love into one final act of defiance. Using the last of her power, she tore open a portal between the realms, a shimmering gateway of pure light that pierced the heart of the Void. And with a final, agonized scream, she dragged the Void Lords back through that portal, sealing them away in their own dark realm for all eternity. Skora watched in horror as Arya's body dissolved into pure energy, merging with the Force, even as the portal collapsed behind her. He felt her presence within him, a final whispered goodbye that echoed through his very soul. And then she was gone, and he was alone in the darkness, the weight of his grief and his victory pressing down upon him like a mountain. He returned to the physical universe a changed man, his heart heavy with the loss of his beloved apprentice. The people of the galaxy hailed him as a hero, the savior who had banished the Void Lords and brought peace to the stars. But Skora knew that the battle was far from over. For the Void Lords were patient, and they were cunning. They would find a way to return, to claw their way back into the world of the living, and there would always be those who sought to harness their power for their own gain, those who would sacrifice entire worlds for a chance at ultimate dominion. So Skora steeled himself for the battles to come, his lightsaber at his side and the Force as his guide. He would keep watch over the galaxy, ready to defend it against any threat, no matter the cost, for he was a Jedi, a guardian of peace and justice, and he would not rest until the light of hope shone bright across the stars once more. With the Void Lords vanquished and the galaxy saved from their dark machinations, Skora stepped into his new role as leader of the HSA and the Knights of Zephyr. His days were filled with endless meetings, negotiations and planning sessions, as he worked tirelessly to rebuild the shattered worlds and unite the disparate races under a banner of peace and cooperation. But even as he poured his heart and soul into this noble endeavor, Skora couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was amiss. He would often find himself staring out into the void of space, his cybernetic eye whirring and clicking as it scanned the stars for any sign of trouble. It started with whispers, faint and fleeting, carried on the solar winds from the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Rumors of strange sightings, of ships disappearing without a trace, of entire colonies going dark overnight. At first, Skora dismissed them as the paranoid ramblings of a traumatized populace, still reeling from the horrors of the Reaper War. But as the reports continued to pour in, growing ever more frequent and disturbing, he knew he could no longer ignore them. With a heavy heart, he bid farewell to his compatriots and set out to investigate his trusty ship, the Starfire, carrying him deep into the uncharted regions of space. What he found there chilled him to the bone. The void spawn, abominations born from the unholy union of Reaper technology and the twisted will of the Void Lords, had risen from the ashes of their master's defeat. These nightmarish creatures, half organic, half machine, possessed the ability to corrupt and control any technology they encountered, twisting it to their own nefarious purposes. Skora watched in horror as a void-spawn dreadnought latched onto a HSA frigate, its tendrils burrowing into the ship's hull like parasitic worms. Within seconds, the frigate's systems were overridden, its crew reduced to mindless thralls under the spawn's control. He knew then that the galaxy was not ready to face this new threat. The HSA, still reeling from the losses of the Reaper War, was in no shape to mount a defense against an enemy that could turn their own weapons against them. And the Knights of Zephyr, for all their skill and bravery, were too few in number to stem the tide of darkness that threatened to engulf them all. With a heavy heart, Skora made a fateful decision. Drawing upon the full might of the Force, he unleashed a massive burst of energy at the center of the galaxy, creating a swirling vortex of destruction that sucked in everything around it like a cosmic whirlpool. The Void Spawn and their Reaper thralls, caught in the Singularity's inexorable pull, were dragged kicking and screaming into its churning depths, their horrific screeches echoing across the stars as they were torn apart, atom by atom. But Skora knew that the Singularity, once created, could not be stopped. It would continue to grow, feeding upon the very fabric of space-time itself, until it consumed not only the Void Spawn, but the entire galaxy as well. With tears streaming down his face, he sent out one final message to his friends and allies, urging them to flee to the farthest reaches of the universe, beyond the reach of the Singularity's grasp. "Go," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Live. Remember us. Remember what we fought for." As the galaxy collapsed around him, Skora remained at the center of the maelstrom, his body and mind sustained by the power of the Force. He became a living conduit, channeling the energy of the Singularity into a single, all-consuming purpose, to forever stand guard against the return of the Void Lords and their spawn. And so as the stars winked out one by one, and the once vibrant tapestry of the galaxy faded into nothingness, Skora stood alone, a silent sentinel against the darkness. His sacrifice, a testament to the indomitable will and courage of the human spirit, would echo through the ages, a shining beacon of hope in a universe consumed by despair. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.